So here's our quick agenda. So we're going to dive into why, briefly. Why are we looking at the invisible footprint? And then we're going to examine what are we doing today as our current approach to AV systems. That's designing, planning, procurement, infrastructure planning, and all of that. And we're going to propose to you some different ways to look at this. And I'm going to admit myself, I'm an architect. I have zero idea about AV. We don't come here with solutions. Our intent here is to propose a different way to think. And how can we apply this thinking and collectively as an industry use the purchasing power that you have to change? So we're going to ask you to, we're going to invite you to come up with ideas through workshops. But if you don't have ideas, that's totally fine. Maybe you can ask questions that you can, as an industry, solve. So we're going to do that group activity in the next 90 minutes here, and hopefully we'll share some great ideas. All right, I didn't want to show you that. All right, let me ask you a question. How many of you, or let me say, raise your hands if you know the temperature outside? Maybe even a guess, a range, 55, 60 degrees, about right? Beautiful outside, right? All right, how many of you know what is the carbon dioxide limit on, or level in the atmosphere? Good try, good try. You can look it up. You cannot look it up. This is, if there's one thing that you're going to take away from this conversation today, I'd like you to just focus on this term, carbon literacy. Just like we know our temperature, weather information just on the back of our hand, our phones keep constantly telling us, we should be paying attention to CO2 levels, because this is what we're fighting for. CO2 level, as of today, is 424 parts per million. And if we reach 450, pardon my language, we're screwed. Okay, so this is something that all of us need to be aware of. And one of the tools that I use in our firm is Clever Carbon. They take some of these technical language and really boil it down to something that you can easily understand. There was a lot of conversation today about us breaching the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold this past year in 2023. So whenever we talk about climate change, this is pretty gloom and doom. Agree? For the next 90 minutes, I'd like you to have a different mindset, because this is full of opportunities. The word in that sentence that says, the world still hasn't missed its climate goal yet. I'm a glass half full kind of guy, so I look at the word yet. So we still have an opportunity. And that's the mindset that I'd like you to get into. A bit more context on carbon. How many of you have heard of this global carbon budget? Great. Here's a simple way to look at this. Before us as humans were even here, for 3.8 billion years, the planet was doing fine. There was a lot of carbon emissions happening, and the planet was able to sink all of that carbon emissions. So the source and the sink was in balance. But once humans came on board, and with the Industrial Revolution, we made this imbalance. So the amount of pollution that we put out is no longer, the planet is no longer able to suck it back up. That is the fundamental problem. So you see here, this is from fossil fuel industry and burning of coal and natural fossil fuels, and how we change our land usage from natural forests to development. This is the challenge, right? But what we always forget is we focus on energy efficiency, renewable energy, and carbon reduction, which is all fantastic. We should keep doing that. But what we forget is when we focus on that, we forget that the land sink and the ocean sink, our actions impact on the ability of the planet to absorb CO2. We forget about that. Because what happens now is, If we only focus on this and don't look at these two things, our actions are impacting land and ocean sink capacity. So now the moment this pulling down or drawdown is reduced, this is only going to become a vicious cycle, right? So that's a fundamental shift in how we want to think about this. It's not just about energy and carbon. There's a lot more things associated with this when we take into account the land and the oceans. Make sense? Okay. All right, here's the information and communications technology as a sector. Where do you all fall? World Bank did a fantastic study that this sector ranges anywhere between 1.5% and 4% of the global emissions. And it is projected to grow by 2030 around 2%. You may see that 2% is insignificant, but 2% is a lot. 2% is equal to the entire aviation industry. So you as an industry, being part of the ICT sector, you're responsible as much as the aviation industry. Think about it that way. This is a huge responsibility, but it's also a huge opportunity. Because what I like about in this study that Boston Consulting Group did was, like we had this conversation at the table, ICT industry has an impact on the planet, but it also has an opportunity to reduce the impact of other sectors through your technology. So there's a lot of opportunities with ICT. Zooming down from the sector to the building level, because we are all part of the built environment. The built environment within the fossil fuel category is responsible for 42% of emissions. And if you take into account the transportation of people coming in and out or going to offices and schools and neighborhoods, that's another 8%. So roughly, building industry is responsible for half the problem. It could also be half the solution. And this industry, built environment, is coming together. It's one of the most fractured industries in the world, but it's coming together. At COP28, I was honored to be part of COP28 in Dubai last year. For the first time in the 30 years of conversations on climate change at the United Nations level, there was one full day at COP out of the 12 days dedicated for buildings. And the entire value chain and supply chain within the built environment came together, and they all agreed on one common goal: near zero emissions and resilient buildings are the new normal by 2030, which is amazing. 28 countries initially signed on to that, including the United States. And following up to that conference in Dubai, last week I was in Paris, where the very first Buildings and Climate Global Forum took place, where it's all talk at the COP level. Somebody has to put that into action, right? So the built environment, again, the value chain and the supply chain came together in Paris, and they brought ministers around the globe that are responsible for the built environment and put them together with businesses and non-governmental organizations that deal with active solutions that are working in the building industry. So to give support to the ministers that this is actually doable. This goal of near zero emissions, resilient buildings by 2030 is very, very achievable. And that was received very well. Now 78 countries have now taken the principles that came out of Paris and are planning to implement that into policies. So a lot of positive momentum is happening. We are seeing a tipping point in this change, in this evolution. Now, you are a part of the building environment or built environment as the AV industry. This is what the World Bank says, or categorizes in terms of how they calculated the global emissions in three big buckets: consumer devices, data centers, and connectivity networks. The challenge here is 2.6 billion people don't even have internet. And the need for ICT technology or sector to grow is really, really high. But at the same time, that sector has a goal of halving its emissions by 2030. Can you all see this wicked challenge of growth and emissions reductions? But all wicked challenges are super fun to solve, right? And it's an amazing opportunity for us. But this is, again, just the visible footprint, right? The direct carbon emissions is what they are talking about. But what we want to talk about today is by adding another facet to this, materials. We had this fantastic discussion from Carlos this morning on e-waste. So by looking at the materials that enable devices and the infrastructure, how can we understand some of the invisible footprint behind this industry? So when we apply the 17 Sustainable Development Goals to this, energy and carbon is only the starting point. And Carlos talked about human health and waste, equity, who has access to this? Biodiversity, it's a huge issue with our sourcing of raw materials. Freedom, Carlos touched on this. I was super taken back by the amount of child labor and forced labor that's involved in the construction industry and the built environment. And a huge impact on water. Somebody mentioned this morning about water energy nexus. For every unit of electricity used in the United States, 2.5 gallons of water is used. But if your energy source comes from a hydropower plant, then it is 7 gallons to the unit. So we have to be really careful about some of these invisible layers. So this is the context of how we're going to unpack today. So far, so good? All right. There you go.
I'll go first.
Doesn't matter.
I
mean, never get the mic back, so.
That's right. I will make sure she gets the mic because she's got a lot of important things to say. So we all have a current approach. Some of this is very familiar, particularly design integration folks that are here, manufacturers included. I'm not going to read through this list here, but we have a way of doing things, right? Usually it's a needs assessment. Maybe if it's a renovation, we're looking at existing conditions. But we tend to walk through the world with blinders on. I'm going to do an AV system, and that's all I'm going to look at. Very rarely do we have conversations with our counterparts within our organizations or like here at UCLA with Office of Sustainability, which I know Joe actually does, but that's a rarity. And so we don't have those kinds of conversations with all of the stakeholders that are involved in this, let alone think about where does that device come from? If I have a laptop, where does the raw materials for that come from? How does that impact that community, the people who extract it, the people who are adjacent to them, the people who then process that and send it up for components, and how does it impact that community? And then how does that move up to assembly and then shipping until it shows up on my desk? And then once I'm done with it, what happens to it? So that whole 360-degree lifestyle, we don't often take into consideration today, or very rarely do we take into consideration today. But we go through this very typical design process, and we're going to give you, we have a little game to play, we're going to give you a typical scenario to work within as a framework. But this doesn't just touch AV, as Prem had mentioned. We're going to show you some cards here. You all have a deck of cards on your table. You're going to see which of the SDGs these areas impact, as well as on the back side, which of the invisible layers that impacts. And why we talk about ICT is it's not just AV. AV, IT integration, all of the ICT industries overlap in addition to the built environment, which is why we've brought Heather with us.
Thank you so much. And I, again, will also have to use my handy dandy notebook or else I will go in 800 directions and we may never leave. So I just wanted to talk about in technology. So I am a technologist by trade. Technology is all I've ever done. From the military, went right into the AEC space and have been in the architectural industry since then. Granted, I am not an architect. So, but from there and looking at all of these different things, we've had to learn some lessons over these last, 5-10 years of what we need and how we do it. And it's not just about, let's go in and put all the newest, latest, greatest stuff into spaces, which is what all of our employees want. They want all the newest and the greatest, and they want all the fancy things. So we had to learn some lessons. To give context, we have about 33 offices. We are a global firm, so we do have offices in Dubai and Shanghai, and I was recently in Dubai having to do their technology transformation into a new office and trying to source in Dubai versus the US. That poses a whole new challenge and restrictions of different things that we have to do. So now we're not only talking about the different suppliers from the US, we're talking about getting things to Dubai and China, and you would think that it's easy, and it is not. So some of these things we need to look at is, it's not just the newest and greatest. We have to think about, how are we going to support it? How is our tech teams going to support this? How are they going, is there tech teams to support it? Where are we going to source it from? How much is it going to cost? How are we going to budget for these for the future? How are people going to use these rooms? It's very different when you have a conference room like this. How are we using it versus a 4-person huddle room? We don't need all this in a 4-person huddle room, but I will tell you, there is a leader out there that goes, yes, we do. We need all of that. We need it to all be the same. And that's another thing, standardizing. They want to be able to go into every different office, and they want to be able to plug in and work. They don't want to have to try to figure it out every time they go into a new office and try to do things. And so we had to learn some lessons from that. And I'll give an example. We had, during the pandemic, we had a lot of things. We ordered a lot of things from some of our vendors here, Crestron, sure. We have Sony. We have some of those products in our DLR group conference rooms. Now, with the pandemic, we had shipping shortages. We had problems. We all know that. So we had to, our offices didn't care. It's okay. We use a lot of them. We just installed a couple Shure speakers. We did. But to say that is, we have all of this, and now that the shipping, everything is coming through, we still had to make those spaces work. So now I have an office in my Cleveland office. We have, we put it in his area. Sorry. We have boxes upon boxes upon boxes of AV equipment that are sitting there because we ordered double, because things weren't shipping, because we had to use it. So this is just a prime example of people wanting things and not talking and not listening and not communicating. And granted, we have a plan for most of all of this. Thank goodness we're able to use it in other places, but what if we didn't? Like, what were we gonna do with it? And now we have all of this other equipment that we're gonna have to recycle and reuse, in which we do. And those are, again, I call these the discovery phases. What are we gonna do with all of this? How are we gonna budget for it? So some lessons that we've learned and we've taken away is, now we talk to each office. How many rooms? We've created a standard for a room. If you have a large conference room, this is what you're gonna get, and this is what it's gonna cost. Medium, small, huddle rooms, Zoom rooms, and so on. And then we talk to the offices. My office in Kansas City might use their huddle room very differently than an office here in Los Angeles. It might be very different. So we talk to them and we figure out, what do you need in that room? Maybe somebody just needs a monitor. Maybe somebody needs a monitor and some microphones, and so why spend it if you don't need it? So it's need versus want. And our job is to make sure, and not everybody understands the need versus want concept. Once you start talking money and cost, they get more of an idea. But so in doing all of this, once we have got all of the design and we have all the standards and we have all the specs, we then go out and we bid out to companies to say, who's gonna come in and install all of this for us? Who's gonna support it? Again, that costs money, that's time, that's support. Because my technology team doesn't have time or the expertise to install all of this services. So there's another layer added onto it. The IT integration, the security behind it. People don't think of the security. You have guest presenters coming in. Look, we have a guest laptop hooking up to the UCLA campus. Who knows what's on Ray's laptop that could, that could infiltrate the campus. But for some of our firms, like ourselves, we do a lot of federal work. So we have high standards of what we have to have across our firm, and that locks some things down. So we have to take some of that into consideration. And then obviously we have to get rid of it. We've talked a lot about that today. How are we, like the R's, Carlos, in the R's, how are we gonna recycle this? How are we gonna reuse it? And we try to do a lot of that. We try to give a lot of it to lower income or people that are less fortunate within the community, whether that's schools or second chance homes, things like that. So we do try our best. And some other things, and we'll see it in another slide about infrastructure and all that cabling. What do you do with all the cabling? What do you do with pulling it? So there's a lot of different things that we're doing. I'm actually heading up to San Francisco to do one of these tonight after I leave here. So it's exciting, but it's a lot of work, and we have a lot of work to do.
And to add to reinforce what Heather was saying about guest presenters, how many of you have employees or know employees that bring their own devices to work? Right? So when we talk about consumer versus pro, that line is gone. Completely gone. You know, I know that's my own personal laptop, and I have 2 smartphones and a tablet. You know, I know you might go, oh, well, that's extreme. The average millennial has 7 devices that they bring to work. And so that all has to be integrated into the pro AV world that we currently are thinking about. Okay, so we're going to talk about now what are some things that we can do, right? And Carlos, you touched a little bit about this, right? Materials. How can we think differently about materials and materials that make up the components? Do they need to be what we have done always in the past? For example, or do we need to pull fiber or copper, or can we be pulling fiber, right? We do know that there's a silica shortage going on right now, but it's far less intrusive than what happens in the copper industry. So you want to go to the next one? End use devices, right? We have a circular economy. How do we really push that? Manufacturers, Shure, Sony, those others here in the room, we need your help. We need to have a good understanding of how products are developed, where they come from, where the components come from, how can we get right to repair, and ability to repair those and keep it going and even give it that second life. And then how can we convince manufacturers to support those products in a second life? I got a little bit of information for you. We do this in the entertainment industry a lot. And there are manufacturers, see a couple ETC Source 4s hanging up here. ETC, if I give my technology to another theater that doesn't have the money to buy brand new, ETC supports that new company. They will repair those fixtures because it builds brand recognition and creates a new customer. So when those people move on, and they have resources to buy new products, that's the first one that they're going to think of. And Shure's going to be at USITT next week, and and they're also on board with that. When we send Shure microphones to another theater, Shure supports that, and that's the kind of thinking we need to have from the manufacturing side.
I just want to put a plug in for a resource that you may not have heard. Design for Freedom is an organization that focuses on child labor and conflict, child labor, forced labor, and conflict free. So they focus on 15 materials in the construction industry. Metals and minerals are part of that. So just take a look at that. They have some standards on how do you procure or who do you procure this from. And it's starting to pick up a lot of momentum in the industry.
Infrastructure.
So I went ahead, but with the infrastructure, I mean, as we grow within technology, these things are only going to get bigger. Data centers are only getting bigger. Everybody's going to the cloud. We have hybrid, we have remote, everything is going, and we have, as people are moving out of spaces, there's cables left behind. Some contracts make you rip all those out. What do you do with them then? Most people are gonna be like, I don't have time for this, let's get rid of it. Like I said, I'm going to San Francisco. We're moving an office into our office. Thank goodness it wasn't in anybody's contract, and we can leave the cables for the next tenant in that building. So that saves everybody time, money, and again, it's reuse.
I was going to say, there's a lot of science that's starting to emerge on the impact of human health from radio frequencies. So that's another layer that we need to be aware of, and how do we overcome that? All right, so these are all not all-inclusive solutions. These are just starting points for us to think differently. So we are ready for our activity here. So I'm going to introduce the activity. So in front of you, there is a small deck of cards, like what Ray's showing you. So the way we've aligned these cards are three categories: materials, end-use devices, and infrastructure. Under materials, we have metals, plastics, and minerals. And thank you, Carlos, for the morning session. A lot of this is very helpful. On end-use devices, we have personal devices, portable devices, installed devices. And for infrastructure, we have hidden infrastructure, visible infrastructure, and invisible infrastructure. So that's the lay of the ground. And what we ask you to think about is come up with ideas. On the back of these cards, we have these places for you to write some strategies. Come up with ideas on these three big buckets. Let me start with the middle one. One of the R's that Carlos talked about, reduce. How can you reduce the need for or impact of these materials, end-use devices, and so on and so forth? This is a great place to start because all of us like efficiency. How many of you have heard of this term, efficiency first? Right? I'm going to say that's not enough. Sufficiency should be even before efficiency. Sufficiency is asking this question, do I really need it? Enough is enough. Right? We are in this consumeristic world. We're not asking those questions to ourselves. So we want you to think about how could you avoid the need for something. And then lastly, innovation. How can you completely transform the way we think about AV systems? So if you can put this all together, sufficiency, efficiency, innovation. Come up with ideas. You may not have ideas, that's fine, but ask questions. Use these boxes on the back of these cards to write your questions or answers. Okay, so here's a hypothetical scenario.
So this is we're here at UCLA. So we looked at a typical smart classroom, collaboration space with a video, a couple video cameras, one on the presenter, one on the audience, a ceiling-mounted 4K laser projector, about 6K lumens, a motorized drop-down projection screen, a document camera, all in a lectern, right? From the audio side, some recessed ceiling loudspeakers, stereo left-right pair of wall-mounted speakers, some beam-forming Shure microphones, and handheld microphone, wireless as well as lavalier, amplifiers for the ceiling speakers, as well as control system of a Crestron presentation switcher, a touch panel interface, an in-room PC, UPS, and so on. So this is the framework in which we want you to think of how you would do this system. So as you're coming up with those innovation, avoid, replace, ideas that you're going to write down, this is your framework. How would you modify this system, or what ideas would you have for this typical system that's what we're looking for? So it's not any system. We want you to use this as a framework so everybody's working from the same thing. Any questions about the system? Yeah, no budget. That's the fun thing, no budget. You have no budget. The rare client. So here's the hypothetical. It's a design and integration of a typical classroom collaborative space. Space is a renovation of an existing classroom. Students have access to present on screen with wireless access or direct HDMI UBC inputs at the lectern. Content delivery by faculty is via the in-room PC or faculty-issued laptop. Dual cameras for hybrid learning environment. Guest lectures via remote WebEx interface through the university's learning management system. We're going to go with Blackboard here. Lecterns at a fixed position, doesn't move, sits there. Q&A to remote participants via wireless handheld microphone, ceiling-mounted mics. Main program audio is through stereo left-right, and remote audio playback is through the recessed speakers. Does that make sense to everybody?
We'll leave this up here. We'll come back to it and leave it up here so you guys can.
Yeah, so we'll leave this slide back up. I just want to quickly give you an idea. So it says 25 minutes, but we don't have 25 minutes. We'll give you maybe 20 minutes tops. Here's what you're doing. First, appoint somebody to speak. That's always the challenge. Somebody gets voluntold. Don't do that. Start with that now. What you're going to do is come up with ideas. First, absorb what's in the cards. Come up with ideas as a group, but identify top 2 or 3, because you only have 2 minutes for each table. There's 10 tables to report out on some of these ideas. Make sense? All right, here we go.
We are going to collect these at the end. So, after this session is over, please leave them on the table because we're going to analyze all the responses, and then we're going to report back after this conference to the group.
All right.
Okay?
All right.
And go. Group collaboration. Get to know your neighbor.
Keep it to 2 minutes, please. Tops, 1 or 2 ideas. Go for it.
I don't know if we followed directions correctly. We spent the majority of our time trying to, but what we did was infrastructure invisible. We talked about transforming it, right? We talked about investigating other ways to immerse the design. We talked about immersive connection, wireless. And then we also talked about like a non-traditional design.
Yeah, so thinking about, not to name drop the Meyer Sound Constellation System, but something like a Meyer Sound Constellation System, or to be fair to other manufacturers, any active acoustic system, if you have embedded into the infrastructure, any of the control boxes, you could do the ceiling speakers and microphones, and that can take care of everything. You don't need to have the handheld mics. You don't need the lavs. You don't need the mounted speakers on the walls. You can get rid of half of it.
And then we went to plastics. We talked about ways to reduce or avoid it. And we said, maybe bamboo. Maybe replacing it with something that we're not aware of right now that could is more sustainable in terms of a material. So that's our 2, and that's what we're sticking to.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, six had their hand up.
6? All right, who's 6? Matt? All right, Matt.
Okay, so a lot of general categories here, so I don't know if we got stuff on the right card under the right box, but some of one of the first ideas that we looked at or came to us was of the control of the AV system. Typically that is a hardware appliance box in these rooms. Virtualizing that, moving that to the virtual environment reduces the need to buy physical hardware, that being manufactured and delivered, and that also provides future-proofing because it can much more be upgradable without having to replace physical hardware. Those resources in the virtual environment run a lot more efficiently as well as the appliance would be. On the avoid, looking at the requirements like UPS, whether UPS is required for the systems or if it's just because of the robustness of the systems, looking for design solutions that are robust enough to not require a UPS for the system, or moving the UPS to a more infrastructure side, building-wide UPS that could be done more efficient way. And then I guess under transform for microphones, everyone's bringing their own devices, so technologies that might be available on personal devices to use your own cell phone as a microphone as opposed to having to have a dedicated unit in the room.
Great. Who wants to go next?
All right, now 7 for real this time. This is yours, Kyle?
Well, we storm-formed and normed pretty quickly as a team. So we wanted to start with void and infrastructure visible. The ways that we avoid it would be donations, as well as reuse in other rooms or rentals. So that was that one. And then in terms of reducing for material minerals, looked at more wireless type presentations so that we can reduce that, as well as like refurbished batteries in those systems as well. And then lastly, when it comes to transform, end user devices installed is to leverage the remote installation capabilities and or use one control system for multiple rooms using different technologies, whether it be Internet of Things of what have you. Or, just buy a Sure system to be able to, I'm sorry, shameless plug.
Sure, restaurant, yeah, sure, thank you. Table 2.
All right.
Wait, we got table 2 up here first.
You can hold on to that.
Okay, so we talked about really reducing the amount of technology in these spaces. So, taking some of the points of failure out. So you'd be reducing microphones in the ceiling, maybe just having one mic to cover the entire space. One important thing that was missing here was the size of the classroom. So if it's a standard 30 by 30, maybe one Shure MXA 920 or a 902 could be the speaker and microphone. That could replace a lot of points of failure. A lot of cabling could be saved. And then taking out certain control systems, making this place future-proof. So you could just have simple wired inputs as a backup, but maybe using a wireless way to connect to these systems allows anyone in the room to be able to connect to them with any type of device that they bring in. Removing in-room PCs can improve security as well. So lots of different ways.
Thanks.
One of ours was whatever equipment we remove, send it to a low-income area or someone who needs it rather than e-wasting it. Standardizing the room on a single cable plan like Cat6. Control processor, and as you all know, Crestron does have this control processor. Thank you, Matt. Yes, that is the best way. Remove them from the individual rooms and put a centralized control processor to control each room. That saves a lot. The UPC, the APC, the power conditioner, you do it on the 208 side in the electrical room, and you just control conditioning, the surge. Don't do battery backup, and then you run the circuits to all the rooms from the surge. So that reduces materials and costs. The PC, get rid of the PC. Only laptops, instructor laptops, unify the connectors on the laptops, all USB-C only. That makes it a little bit more modular and future-proof. The camera. Take the camera and change it to a single camera that can auto-track to presenter and audience at the same time. Did I miss any? That's it. Okay.
Great. Okay, we got table 1 up here. But really taking a look at what the spectrum is and how you can reduce and transform and avoid things over a wide spectrum of spaces, not just a single space. So this is just one. Now imagine 5 campuses, right? Or 33 offices, and the impact that you can make within an organization.
This was great. I was excited to just hear all these ideas. Were you excited to hear all these ideas? Yeah, this was great. We gave you an example that's very tactical, right? And it's very tangible because this is the world most of us are involved in. But I also invite you to take another giant step back and look at this as an industry. As an industry, what can you avoid? What can you reduce? What can you transform? It's something for you to continue to think through and come up with policies, standards, regulations. The opportunity is really in front of us. So with that, we are done. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Well, if you have any questions, we're going to hang out for the rest of the conference here.
Hi, thank you. Been here, really privileged to be here to represent the QSE team. We have about 5 of us here. We started our journey a while ago, and we're really privileged to have a person in our audience on our team who's leading the project for QSC, who actually worked with a lot of the people in the UN video. So we are really proud to have that. We're very, very committed, and we're super proud to be a sponsor, and hopefully can continue to grow that sponsorship as we engage with SAVE going through the years. So thank you very much.